Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Getting Strong-Willed Kids to Listen webinar with Jodie Thornton. I wanted to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the custodians of the lands, waterways, and sky from where I am today. I pay respect to the past and present Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders, and to support the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children to be educated in their own language. You can check out the work of Children's Grounds. They're a great organisation that are Aboriginal led and Aboriginal run, who really want to look at what are the social and emotional benefits of learning, of being educated in your own language, your first language, and also the benefit that that has in the context of keeping languages alive, because of the fact that quite a lot of the Aboriginal languages they've struggled to keep these languages alive because of systemic pressures. And so that's a really great organization in the case that you would like to also support their work. They have tax deductible donations available, and really just to check out and also just share the word about their work would be fantastic if you feel so inclined. So about me, my pronouns are she and her. I have four children who are 26, 23, 11, and 9. And so we are a blended family. So my oldest two, who are 26 and 23, they are my husband's kids from his first marriage. And I met them when they were 5 and 8. And we have our 11 and 9-year-olds together. And we also have a 3-year-old granddaughter who is just gorgeous. And yeah, and this is like being a part of a blended family is how I got started in this work as well, because of the fact that whenever we had general, like the stock standard blended family issues, I would go to see psychologists and social workers to get support. And it definitely was helpful, but I just didn't feel like I was getting a real understanding of what the kids needed from me in order to be able to be resilient, but also assertive and considerate, and be able to stand up for themselves, but also to be a team player. And like I just felt like the practical day to day just wasn't really as helpful as I needed it to be. And so that really started me down on the process of looking, seeking out what would be helpful, and eventually getting involved in supporting families, which I've been doing now for almost as long as my youngest has been alive. So about 9 years now, I've been supporting other families in this work. So today we're going to be looking at actually why we don't want the standard approaches for getting kids to listen to work, which might seem like a funny thing to say, but it's not just why they don't work, but why we don't actually want them to work. We're going to look at a gentle parenting aligned approach to give kids the best chance to listen for the right reason. So we don't want to create people pleasers. We don't want our children to be acquiescing just because we're adults. We want to be getting them to listen for the right reasons. And we're going to look at what you need to do practically moment to moment to help that happen, and how to stay calm when they don't listen. Because of course, like all the strategy and technique in the world, your child is not always going to listen, partly because of developmental stages, and also partly because, we're not machines, we are people. And so our kids are not always going to listen. And so we want to know what are we going to do? How are we going to handle it when they don't listen, including how to stay regulated. So I'd really love to know if you would like to share what is your biggest challenge in getting your strong-willed kid to listen. Feel free to share as much or as little as you like, and I will not use identifying details when I read it out, so that the recording protects your privacy. So these are the things that I hear most frequently from parents. So it's like I prioritize what my kids want as much as I can. I really try to be considerate. But the thing is, some things just need to happen, like getting their shoes on or getting in the car or going to daycare or whatever the thing is. Some things just really need to happen. And I need my child to be able to listen in those moments. A lot of parents will say, I'm worried that giving in all the time will make them selfish. So I want to be more, I don't want to be authoritarian, but I also don't want to raise a selfish kid. Some parents will say, I'm worried that I'll crush their feisty spirit, which will be so good for them in adulthood. So you want them to keep that ability to advocate for themselves, to keep that ability to stand up for what's important to them. But at the same time, again, we still need to get the shoes on and get to daycare and all the things, right? And more specifically, I'm worried that I'll turn them into a people pleaser. And that's really that piece around when we are the opposite, right? It's like, I don't want to make them selfish, but I also don't want to make them a people pleaser. I don't want them to be prioritizing what's important for everybody else and not getting to know what's important for themselves. Another thing that happens really regularly is parents will say, out of desperation, I have tried everything, including the things that I am really not comfortable with, but it doesn't matter because none of it works anyway, right? Like I've tried every which way to do this and they just will not listen. And the last one that's from the really common examples is a parent will say, I'm okay with them being strong-willed, but my partner is wanting to use old school discipline, but because they think my way is too soft. And so then what we end up with is this like, it's almost like the more you are trying to be gentle, the more your partner is using more and more old school techniques. But then the more you want to be gentle to counteract their parenting, and then the more they want to be strict to counteract yours, right? And it kind of becomes a polarizing thing, as well as the ongoing issue of the stress of having arguments or just disagreements about how to parent. It's really, really hard when none of these things are working, right? When you're not on the same page. And I hear from all kinds of parents that some gentle parents who are partnered will say, my partner has zero interest in gentle parenting and will not do it. But I hear from other parents, it's like, my partner is actually bought in theoretically. They get it and they want to do it. But ultimately, they think that our child is just like really undisciplined, like our child is just so difficult and will never listen, and they think, well, that can't be a good way to raise them, and so even though they're bought in theoretically, they're not willing to continue with gentle parenting because they feel like it's not working, right? Our children should be well behaved and they're not getting that outcome, so they don't want to do it anymore. And all of those examples are like incredibly stressful to go through on a day-to-day basis. So, and like some parents will say multiple of those things to me, but these are the most common examples that I hear. So we want to talk about why the standard approaches to get kids to listen actually suck, right? The standard approaches, so they'll do one or more of these things. They help our kids want what we want, right? So want them to see things from our perspective, or we want kids to really get in a way that might even not be developmentally appropriate, to understand the consequences of their actions or all these kinds of things, right? We want them to want what we want. Another way is we want to make kids uncomfortable enough, right, that they will listen. Or we want to give them something that they want badly enough. So using rewards, right, or incentives to get them to listen. We want to fill their cup up enough, give them enough connection that they will listen. We want to give them the illusion of control, right? It's like pretending that they have control when really they don't. And all of these things, the intention is getting kids to let go of what they want, right? So they'll do what we want them to do. That's the underlying driver here. Is for all of these approaches, what we want is for them to stop focusing on what's important to them and do what it is that we want, right? And ultimately, we don't want that, right? We don't want them to learn to acquiesce. We don't want them to learn that, in a loving relationship, if it's important to the other person, you should just go along with it, right? Yes, from time to time, we want to be focusing on, what's important to the other person, but ultimately, we want them to get what they want in life. It's just that we also want other people to get what they want, and we also want all of our children's needs to be met. So the example I often use with this is that if they want ice cream for dinner, we want them to have what they want, but the thing is, it's not necessarily great for their nutrition, or it might not be good for their ability to wind down for sleep, or might not be great for their teeth. Like there's all these other reasons why, like, it's not just about getting along with other people, it's also balancing all of their own needs, not just the one that feels most important to them, right? And so with particularly for strong-willed kids, we can use their strengths, right? Strong-willed kids are extremely creative problem solvers. And they have real persistence, as you are aware, because of the way they are able to, whether it's a child who's consistently argumentative or really stubborn, or the ability to just do what they want, regardless of what you want, right? They have real persistence in a way that other kids, different personalities, don't have. They are also able to sit with frustration and big feelings while they stay focused on finding a solution or obtaining that solution. Now, a lot of parents will say to me, well, my child is strong-willed, but they don't have that. I have yet to come across a strong-willed child who doesn't have the capacity to do that. It's just that they might need some practice to build those skills, right? So if your child is in a position where they're very strong-willed, but they don't yet have the capacity to sit with frustration and their big feelings, they have the ability to do that. And like ultimately, so I've been helping families for 9 years, in many different things, but in terms of getting kids to listen, strong-willed kids are the quickest to learn, right? They are the quickest to learn because of these strengths. They're really great creative problem solvers, and their persistence and ability to sit with those feelings, that we get the quickest turnaround on not just like a child who is obedient or acquiesces, but a child who is able to participate in problem solving and finding a way that works for everybody. We get the quickest results with strong-willed kids. So if we look at an example of what this would look like, your child has a need, right? The need comes up and their feelings tell them that that need wants attention, right? We need to do something in order to get this need met. And so an example of that might be, I don't feel important because the baby gets what they want immediately, and that doesn't happen for me, right? The baby always gets the bottle that they prefer, or the baby always gets the blanket they prefer, or, all these things that just have to be just so for the baby, but I don't get that, right? And so your child's subconscious mind looks for the quickest and easiest way to get that need met. And so in this example, they might be like, well, I need the pink cup, right? That pink cup symbolizes that if you will get me the pink cup when I demand it, that means that I'm just as important as the baby, right? And we try to use reason. We'll say the pink cup is in the dishwasher, or we left the pink cup at nanny's house, or whatever like the reason is. And so we want them to just take another cup. But this doesn't fix the issue, which is I don't feel as important as the baby, right? And so then your child will say, even though the cup is in the dishwasher, but I need it. Like they get really, really fixated on it, because what we're trying to do with the reasoning is tell them that they shouldn't expect to get the need met, right? And that's because we have been conditioned in our culture to think that it's selfish to get your needs met, to think, and particularly if you've been socialized feminine, you will be conditioned to think that the way you are loving and kind is to focus on everybody else's needs, not on your own, right? And so when we look at, like, when we're saying like the pink cup is in the dishwasher, you can't have it, so therefore you shouldn't want it, right? But that's not how needs work, because ultimately, if it's a need, the need is to feel important. The pink cup is only one way to make that your child feel important, right? And just to be clear, I think boys can have pink cups. The reason I corrected myself is I try to use gender neutral language, but of course the boys can have the pink cups if they want them. But yeah, so what we want to be looking for is, okay, if we can't get the pink cup, what else can we do that's realistic and practical in the situation and takes account of everybody else's needs, while also helping your child feel as important as the baby, right? And so the first thing we want to do, so that's like kind of the concept. If we look at what we need to do in the in the example of what's happening, the very first thing we want to do is ask more skillfully. So we want to give reasons for what we need them to listen about. So can you put your shoes on because I'm worried that your feet will get hurt if they don't have something to protect them, right? So you can see how, now I always use a lot of words. You do not need to use as many words as I do. I just like to talk, as you might be aware. But you can see the point here is I'm trying to convey that the shoes have a purpose. And people will say to you, you know, children know that, but not necessarily. And particularly when we don't give reasons, that's where we run the risk of getting into power struggles because it feels arbitrary. It feels like we're just asking them to do something because it's important to us, not because there's some practical purpose of what's going on here. And we want to use the real reason. And why I say that is that sometimes I'll use cleaning up as an example. Sometimes when we say things like everybody needs to be responsible for cleaning up after themselves. Now, that may be true. However, your child knows that at different people's houses, different people are responsible for doing the cleaning up. So in some houses, kids always are responsible to pack up their own toys. In other houses, the parents always do it. At nanny's house, nobody worries about mess, you know, like, or whatever the situation is, right? But your child can see that there are different situations in different houses. So why does our house have to have a rule that I don't agree with? Right. And so then we go into, if it's cleaning up after yourself, it's like, it's because I am exhausted and I don't have the energy to pick up the toys. Well, why do the toys need to be picked up at all? I can't relax unless the room is tidy. Now, that wouldn't be true for me personally. I do not mind if the lounge room is messy. So I wouldn't use that answer. I would use probably the most accurate thing to say is we have people coming over, so we need to tidy up, right? So, or I need to mop, so I need everything off the floor, right? That might be another reason, but we want to look at what is the real reason that we need them to listen. The next thing we want to notice is, are you asking or are you telling? So if we use that shoes example, if I say, oh, hey, can you put your shoes on? Right? I'm asking a question, but I don't actually have any interest in their answer. Can you put your shoes on? Or are you ready to put your shoes on? If they say no, well, do they have a choice? And sometimes if they do have a choice, by all means ask. But if it's a time when they actually don't have a choice, we want to be really clear that we're telling them, not asking them. And so obviously, if we look at gentle parenting principles, we don't want to be controlling things where we don't have to. We don't want to be making rules that they don't have to. But for example, if everybody wants to go to the park and it's not safe for your child to have bare feet at this park, then they need their shoes on and you are telling, not asking. And if we go even further with that example, what if your child says, well, I don't want to go to the park enough to put my shoes on? Well, again, is that negotiable or isn't it? Because for some kids, if they don't get park time every day, then their regulation is out the window. And so you might be saying, I understand that you would prefer not to have to put your shoes on, but it's important that we get to the park so that we can use all our big muscles and then feel better when we get back home, right? Whereas if it's a different situation and you don't actually need the park visit, then yeah, if it's okay to stay home and they would rather not put their shoes on, then it's okay. But again, we want to be really clear, are we asking or are we telling based on the facts of the situation? Now, feel free to pop any questions you have in the chat box. I can answer them as we go, or I can answer them at the end, whichever you prefer. So just feel free if anything comes up that either doesn't make sense or doesn't feel like it would work or doesn't feel like it would make sense for your child, feel free to pop anything you'd like to in the chat box. So then we come to, so what if what you're asking is actually something that's just important to you? And people will say, well, like if the child doesn't care about that, like it's not important to them, then we wouldn't expect them to be considerate. They're not developmentally ready to be considerate. But the thing is that kids are actually way more considerate than people give them credit for. And particularly strong-willed kids, they're so justice is a really important thing for strong-willed kids. They care about you getting your needs met just as much as they care about their own. The reason they can sometimes appear to be selfish is because they're unwilling to be selfless, right? So they're not, it's not that they don't want you to get what you need, it's that they don't want to sacrifice themselves to get there. And again, that's something that we want them to keep. It's just that we want to get more skilled at finding options that work for everybody, right? And so, and even if we look at situations where we're not at the point where we can get a solution that works for everybody, then we want to also focus on the fact that respecting other people's needs and boundaries, even when you don't understand them, is a really important life skill. So if you were to say to your child, again, this wouldn't be true for me, but it's true for other people, I can't relax unless the lounge room is tidied up, right? They may just be like, well, that just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't stress me out, right? And like if they were a bit older, we might talk to them about what that is about, right? Like why we feel like we can't relax unless the lounge room is tidy. But even then, no matter how old you are as a person, a young child, an older child, an adult, the ability to respect other people's needs and boundaries, even when you don't understand them, is so crucial for healthy relationships, for romantic relationships, as well as family relationships, workplace relationships, friendships, right? Not assuming that people should acquiesce because you don't understand it is like so critical for truly healthy relationships where everybody gets to be their full selves, right? And so we want to set the scene now where if it's something that's important to you or their sibling or somebody else and it doesn't make sense for them, we want to get to a place where it's not just that they then acquiesce, but it's that we go, right, those are your needs and your boundaries. These are my needs and my boundaries. How do we find a solution that works for everybody? And so then, when we can't find a solution that works for everybody, we want to first respond with empathy. We want to reflect their perspective and acknowledging the deeper need. So if it was the cup, like the pink cup, and because baby, I don't feel important because baby always gets what they want, and I don't like I'm not getting what I want every time. Might want to say, oh, sweetie, you're so disappointed that you can't have the pink cup because you want to get what you want, just like the baby gets what she wants, right? Like you can see how I'm not trying to tell them that they shouldn't feel the way they feel, right? They are disappointed and or they might be sad, they might be angry, like you're reflecting what their actual feelings are and you're tying it to the deeper need. Because if we tie it to the deeper need, that gives us more options to find a solution. Or if we can't find a solution, they still feel like their need matters to you and that you would do something about it if you could. Now, if the need doesn't feel valid, we want to go deeper, right? So if we think about a need that might not feel valid, is like needing to have things your own way, right? Like it doesn't feel valid, right? But a lot of people will say my child just needs things to go their way, right? But actually, what's underneath that could be autonomy. It could be that they think that the reason you're asking for what you want is arbitrary. So why can't it be my way? Right. And so that is actually not even a need. It's like actually like just getting clear on what's important to each other. Right. So we want to, if anything doesn't feel like it's valid, we want to go deeper and see what we can find that's underneath that need. Now, there's a couple of commonly misunderstood needs that I really want to talk about. So the need to matter is really, it commonly is seen as something that outside of gentle parenting, it's seen as something that we should not promote in people. Inside of gentle parenting, it's often feels like we as parents should acquiesce to what's important to the child because we don't want to sacrifice their sense that they matter to us, that they're important to us. When actually there's so many different ways to find out, to make sure that your child feels like they matter to you. And I think that that's really sometimes gets missed in how we think about gentle parenting. So really looking at, do they feel like they matter to you, to their other parent, to their siblings? Like, do they really feel like they matter to people around them? The next one that's often misunderstood is autonomy. So again, that comes down to that it feels like they always need their way. Autonomy is an interesting one because there's so many ways to get the need, like the need for autonomy met. But it's interesting because so often what we see that as the way to respect their autonomy is to respect how they want to meet that need. Whereas again, we can come back to there's so many different ways to meet the need for autonomy. If they're wanting to test their skills at the park in a way that's unsafe, well, we can find a different way to test the same skills that doesn't make them unsafe, right? Rather than just say, you can't do that because it's not safe. We're like, okay, so what were you wanting to do at the top of the big slide that's too big for you, for your age, or for your skills, I should say, less about age, but more about their physical skills and awarenesses. What was exciting about that? What else can we do that would still help them meet that need for autonomy? Now, connection is the big one because you see a lot of people say it's not attention seeking, it's connection seeking. And sometimes it is, absolutely, sometimes it is. But so often people use connection as a way to soften the blow of not getting other needs met. Right. So the need might be for novelty, like to do something interesting. The need might be for fun. The need, and let's use that one, right? I want to play Barbies with my parent, and my parent does not want to play Barbies because they get tired of Barbies all the time. If the need is for fun, right? If it's not actually about connection, then they can learn to play independently, right? Or they can play with a sibling. If the need is for connection, then it doesn't have to be Barbies, it can be something else, right? And so we really want to get good at differentiating, but particularly between those few needs. But in general, we want to get really good at recognizing what's the need underneath what they're wanting or why they're refusing to listen. So, how can that need be met? So if we look at how our culture talks about needs or how our culture views needs, your needs aren't always a priority. So you can't always get what you want, right? And we also talk about wants versus needs. That's a want versus a need. Ultimately, anything that you want, there's a need underneath that want, right? So ultimately, there isn't actually just wants, right? But there's different ways to get that want met. So if you think about a want being, if we look at a child's example, a want might be a new Barbie every week, right? Well, what is that about, right? Like it's not like we just dismiss, I want a new Barbie every week. We don't just go, oh, you don't actually need that, so we're not going to do it. What we're looking for is, what does the new Barbie every week do for your child, and how do we get that met in a different way? And our culture really wants us to know that it's so important that you understand you can't always get your needs met, right? It's so pervasive. And now that I've said this, I want you to pay attention to, like, whether it's TV shows or what people say, even in gentle parenting spaces, there's so much focus on you can't always get your needs met. But actually, we can focus on what can be done. There are 11 billion ways to get each of your child's needs met. And if we focus on finding a way that works rather than trying to focus on how do we get our children to get accustomed to not getting their needs met, life just becomes so much easier and so much more brilliant for both the child and for you. So we've got a question in regards to the Barbie example and connection. Does the parent suggest an alternate activity in that scenario? Yeah, so I'd start with, so I'd go back to that asking skillfully piece. So, actually, it would be reflecting the need piece, right? So if you're not sure what the need is, we want to check in, right? So, sweetie, is it that you wanted to be with me, or is it that you wanted to play Barbies? Right? Or is it that you're really wanting to have some fun right now? Or is it that you really wanted to hang out with me? Right? Really looking for how do we differentiate. Now, I generally speak in very similar terms to how I speak with adults when I speak to young kids, but it's a personal choice whether you do that or whether you speak in the words that your child would use. But just really clarifying what is it that you want to do. And let's say it's clear, I just want to be with you. Haven't seen you all weekend and like we haven't really hung out. I really want to be with you. So obviously that child, if they're speaking like that, they'll be a little bit towards the older end of the spectrum. But still, if it's clear that it's connection, then we want to say, then we move back into the asking skillfully. So why is it that you don't want to play Barbies? And so you want to be really specific. It might be, I don't like playing Barbies very much because I feel like no matter what I say when we're playing Barbies, no matter what I tell my Barbie to say, you don't really like it. And then I kind of get a bit frustrated because I feel like some of my ideas like aren't good, aren't the ideas that you're wanting to play with. And so I get really frustrated. So could we try something else, right? And so yes, make an alternative scenario. It's like I would really like to play trucks, because when we play trucks we don't have to come up with what the trucks would say, and then I don't feel frustrated, right? Or another example might be, I don't like to play Barbies because I don't really know what I want the Barbie to say. And so I don't really have any ideas for that. So it's not really fun for me. So can we, blah, 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 can we build a tower with our magna tiles or something like that, right? Another example might be, I'm exhausted. So I can't think about what, like I can't do playing that requires me to think. So what if we instead sat on the couch and played some of our favorite songs and give each other massages, right? Or I'm just using random examples, right? But I'm just giving a suggestion, and then we're seeing, okay, what would be fun for both of us, or what meets your child's need for connection while meeting your need, which is the reason you don't want to play Barbies. So I hope that helped. Please let me know if it wasn't clear. So sometimes we really can't get the needs met. So I think that in general, needs aren't actually really that complicated. The issue is partly we're not practiced at finding ways to get the needs met in the practical situation that we have. And partly we don't have the time, right? And so, and especially the time in, today's world, because it's really hard to have, like, I don't know any parent who feels like they have enough time to do everything. And so then maybe we could figure out a way that works for everybody, but it literally would take longer than the time we have available. Right now, I'm sure there are some examples where we can't get the need met, even if we had the time and we were practiced. But the vast majority of the time, it's really about we're not practiced at finding a solution that works for everybody, or we literally just don't have the time to figure it out. So when that need can't be met, we want to reinforce that their needs matter, and we want to let them know that you would if you could, right? And we want to clearly explain this is what is in the way. So it's like, if you imagine, I want to finish my Lego. I don't want to go to Nan's house for dinner, right? You might say, oh, sweetie, I wish you could finish your Lego right now because I can see you're really enjoying it and you just really want to get to that point where it feels finished and you feel great about having done it, right? So translation, that's about, it could be about competence, but it's more likely about completion, like that needs to feel accomplished, right? So I wish you could finish your Lego building. But the thing is, we told Nan that we were going to be at her place for dinner at 6. And if we don't turn up at 6, everybody's going to be hungry while they wait for us. And so we're going to have to get going, my sweetie. I'm so sorry. And so you can see how I'm not trying to tell them that they shouldn't feel the way they feel. I'm I am saying I would change it if I could, and I'm explaining specifically what is in the way, that everybody else is going to be hungry while they're waiting for us to get here, right? And so then they can see that it's not arbitrary. They can see that like the time that was chosen, it's not like nobody cared what Lego you would be doing at that day, right? It's like they're actually being considered, and just we're not going to be able to finish the Lego before we go. Oh, whoops, I've double clicked. And so if they don't, they're really upset about this, right? We want to provide them with empathy. If we can, we want to do it in the moment, right? So sometimes you won't have the time, and sometimes you will not have anything emotionally in the tank, and you can't do it. So we don't need to do it when we can't. If we can't do it in the moment, we'll do it later, right? It is just as good for your child to receive empathy at a later time for something that happened like earlier today or yesterday or last week. Like, we still want to just say, oh, sweetie, when you were really upset about the Lego and I couldn't stop and talk about your feelings, I just had to rush you into the car. I'm so sorry about that, my sweetie. I really know how important it was for you to finish that Lego piece. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry we had to rush. And I'm also so sorry that I didn't have the time to really sit and talk about it. Right? We want to reflect their feelings and needs. So I could see that you're so sad that, or so frustrated that you couldn't finish. You really wanted to finish your Lego design and you didn't feel like you could do that. Like, we didn't have the time. Again, I use too many words. I always do. You don't have to do that. But the point is, we're tying in their feelings and their needs so that they feel seen and heard and like they matter. And also, it helps them to match their feelings and needs with what's going on for them, like to really, it helps them to build the ability to articulate their feelings and needs when we talk about their feelings and needs while we're giving them empathy. Now, a big thing here is they're allowed to stay in the feelings, right? If they're still frustrated that they didn't get to finish their Lego, they're allowed to stay frustrated. They don't have to get out of that feeling if they're not ready to get out of that feeling. We're not trying to change the feeling, we're trying to hold space for the feeling. Oh, I don't know what's going on with this double clicking at the moment. Okay, we'll go back to, here we go. So now we're getting to that point where staying calm can be difficult. Now, you may lose your cool at any point in this process for so many reasons. I don't know any parent who has all the privilege that would be required to always stay regulated. I just don't know anyone. And I know that there are many people who are able to push their feelings down. I know that there are many people who are able to look regulated on the outside, but they're not regulated on the inside. I don't know any parent who is able to consistently stay regulated the way our society is currently set up, because there are so many systemic pressures on parents that I just don't know anyone. And maybe there are some people, but it's not the bulk of us, right? And so what we want to be doing is looking at how do we handle that when we do get close to losing our cool. So when it comes to listening, there's 3 reasons that we lose our cool. So the first one is we think they're being unreasonable. So when we're looking at like, I am doing everything I can and you won't even brush your teeth, all right? Or I have given you 3 warnings and you're still refusing to put your shoes on, or whatever the thing is, right? We're just at that surface level and we're like, you are not being considerate or you're not being reasonable. The solution to this one is to come back to what is the need. There's always a need for why they are refusing to do what you're wanting them to do. And the more you can notice the need, then it gets you out of dysregulation, because it feels like this is technically a solvable problem. I may not be able to solve it right now, but it's technically a solvable problem, because when we think they're being unreasonable, it feels like an unsolvable problem because we're just stuck. It also then makes it easy for all of our baggage to come up about how, and these are just different examples, not necessarily every example is for every person, but how in all my relationships, I'm always the one who's bending over backwards, and no one, is considerate of what's important to me. Or there's no way for me to do a good job as a parent because I can't even get, like, they have to brush their teeth. I can't not let them brush their teeth. But then if I can't get them to do that, then we end up in a having a difficult night every night. Like, how am I supposed to be a good parent when I'm stuck with this? Like, there's so many different ways that our baggage can come up when we're thinking that they're unreasonable. When the baggage comes up, it makes it 11 billion times harder to stay regulated. So the more you can focus on noticing what is the need underneath this behavior, and even if you can't see what the need is, just recognizing that there is a need, even if you can't figure out what it is, that will help you to stay in a regulated space. The next one is that we feel stuck, right? Ultimately, our culture looks at, like, you should be able to fix everything. That's how we talk about issues, right? Now, when our culture thinks we're fixing problems, some of the ways we fix problems is for people to acquiesce, or for us to rewrite history and make it like it wasn't ever a problem to begin with, right? But there's no space in our culture these days for, like, accepting that some problems, like we can't solve them immediately, or we just don't know how to solve them, right? There's no space for that in our culture at the moment. And so what we want to recognize is that we don't have to solve the problem. We want to try, and we'll get better and better at the skills at solving the problem. But what we want to do is, if we can't figure out a way to solve this, we're going to make a call about what is the best available option to us in that moment. And then we're just going to reinforce the reason why you can't agree and or empathize with your child, right? So you're really just making it clear that you would do it differently if you could, but we can't, and this is why, and then hold space for their feelings either then or later down the track. And we get out of this feeling, like, the stuckness feeling brings up feelings of helplessness and or powerlessness, and or the feeling of being trapped, right? And then once we get into that space, then it escalates in our nervous system, which makes it harder to stay regulated. And so if we know that if we cannot fix this, we just need to make a decision on what's the best available option we have available to us at the moment, and then handle their feelings and our feelings, that's okay, right? And then all of a sudden we don't get stuck in that powerlessness, helplessness trapped. We can feel like we're doing, this is the best situation that we have, and we'll get better at this over time. Now, the next reason that is really common for us to lose our cool is we resent that our needs aren't met, right? And so in that case, we want to look at solutions that work for both of you, right? Now, if you can't get a solution that works for both you and your child or children, if you have multiple, we want to prioritize our needs. If we don't do that, we're going to lose our cool. Because if we're going to lose our cool, that's not great for anybody, right? And so that's not great for you, because then you've got time, you need to recover, and you'll feel awful about what you did or didn't do while you were dysregulated. And in the time where you're dysregulated, you're not attuned to your child and you're not attuned to yourself, right? So then we're causing more and more issues to come up. So if we need to prioritize ourselves because we're going to lose our cool, we do that. But if it's any other situation, I say let's prioritize the kids' needs. Now, there's no right or wrong. These are just guidelines. But I think that when it's a case that it's not that we're going to lose our cool, prioritizing our kids' needs is, I think, important, because kids are so expected to not have needs in our culture, that not just from like any internalized culture that we have, but from other adults in their lives, they will be treated as though if their needs can't be met, they just need to suck it up. And so whenever in our relationship with our child, whenever we can't find a solution that works for both of us, whenever we can, prioritizing their needs, it's not so much, I want to be really clear, I'm not saying you should acquiesce. We always want to be looking for the solution that works for everybody. But when we're stuck, if we can prioritize their needs, I think it helps to make them believe that their needs are genuinely important. both to us as their parent, but also in general, their needs matter, right? And I think and I also think it's helpful in terms of building trust with your child that you are really genuinely concerned about them getting their needs met, and that trust means that they're more likely to be able to go with the flow when you can't get their needs met, right? They know that you would do it if they really know that you would do it if you could, right? So that's really just guidelines, it's not like a requirement. So whatever feels right to you in that moment, we want to do. But we really want to get out of the place where we resent that our needs aren't met. And this gets even more complicated if that dynamic is playing out in your relationship as well with your partner. That resentment building up becomes really hard to stay regulated. So we really want to unpack that and get more and more skilled at finding solutions that work for everybody, which will include getting to know what your needs really are, because most of us have been conditioned not to pay attention to our needs. And so we don't really know what our needs are. We're just kind of working on autopilot. So that's our strategies for staying calm when things don't go well. And so then when we look at like where can we go off track? Like where does it go wrong when we try to implement this? So one of the things is one-way communication. So how this looks when it comes to getting our kids to listen is we ask them to listen. They say they don't want to, and then we try again to give a different explanation or a different reason, or we try to get them to understand why we expect it. Like we're looking at all these ways where we're trying to tell. We're not actually hearing what's in the way for them, right? So if you ask one time and they do not do what you ask, your next thing is to ask a question so you can understand what's going on from their perspective, right? We want not just the getting clear on why they're not listening, but we also want the problem-solving process to be a team thing. It's you and your child together trying to find a solution. Next thing is we're not getting to the root of the problem. So if we're at the surface level, it becomes really hard. So an example of how this might play out is you're coming up with like, well, if I don't want to play Barbies, what about trucks? What about towers? What about trains? What about reading? What about, and you're just coming up with solution. But it's like you're not clear on what the root of the problem is. So all these suggestions are not working because you're not finding something that truly meets their need as well as yours. We as adults want to try and convince our kids that either they don't want what they want or that they should want what we want. So really look for, are you trying to convince them, or are you trying to understand what's going on for them, understand what's going on for yourself, and find a solution that works? We can sometimes inadvertently invalidate their feelings or needs. So we see this a lot when, particularly when we feel like children are overreacting, right? If you feel like your child is overreacting, that means you haven't yet truly understood their perspective, because the child's feelings are that intense for a reason. And so we really want to understand that if the feeling or need doesn't feel valid to you, keep going deeper so that you really understand their perspective. An easy way for listening to go wrong is you're overgiving or overstretching. So an example of this would be when, let's say you want your child to pack up their toys and come to lunch, and they're like, I'm not ready. And and they say, I need 5 more minutes. And you say, okay, 5 more minutes. And then they say, I'm still not ready. Another 5 minutes. Okay, 5 more minutes. And then you think that if I just agree, if I agree one more time, a better word would be acquiesce. If I acquiesce one more time, eventually they will get enough of what they need and come to lunch. But if you're doing this to the point where you're overstretching, then it's much more difficult for you to hold space for their feelings when you have to say, sweetie, we really need to eat our lunch now, which could be because if they don't eat, they'll get hungry, or it could be because the lunch is going to be cold and then they won't want to eat it, or whatever the reason is that we need to have the lunch right then, right? It's very difficult for you to be attuned to what's going on for them and be curious about what's going on for them when you have overgiven to the point where you now don't have any more patience, right? You now just want them to listen because you are at your limit, and then you don't have the capacity to go through the process of understanding why they're not listening and then helping them handle their feelings of frustration or disappointment or sadness if we're not able to do what they wanted to do. And then another one is a lot of us struggle with feeling comfortable with making the best available decision. We don't, so this can come from people pleasing, right? We're conditioned. So the culture in general conditions us for people pleasing. But again, if you're socialized female or feminine, I should say, you're socialized feminine, then you are more likely to be conditioned with people pleasing. And so then when it comes to there's no good option here, we feel very uncomfortable with just saying, hey, I don't have the right option. We're going to go with this because it's the best available option. We don't feel comfortable with that. What we want is for them to agree. We want them to be like, can't you see I'm doing the best that I can? You know, like we're really not feeling comfortable in with the time and energy that we have available right now, the options we have available to us. There's nothing that's going to be perfect, but this is the best we can do. We're just going to do that. We want to get really comfortable with that. So it may be unpacking people pleasing. It may be looking at what worries you have, or what do you make it mean if you make a decision that upsets somebody else, right? There's a lot of baggage we can hold around that. So if you have any more questions, now would be a great time to pop them in the chat. And while you do that, I want to talk about some support that I can offer from here if you'd like it. So based on what we've talked about tonight, can you see that we're fundamentally changing the way we cooperate with our kids? Right? So instead of deciding whose turn it is to acquiesce, we're solving the problem in a way that works for both of us, right? We're really looking at a different way of relating, which is not common in our culture, not just in parenting, but just in any context, like romantic relationships, in the workplace, in friendships. We're not used to this way of unpacking the root cause of the problem and finding solutions. And so then taking this approach, when we can't solve the problem, our children still experience feeling deeply seen, heard, and understood, right? Regardless of whether we can solve the problem or not, they still feel seen, heard, and understood, which is so important for their sense of self, as well as for the strength of your relationship as well. We also are able to keep our cool and not just pretend that we're regulated on the outside, but be genuinely regulated. Now that takes a little bit of practice. It's where we're heading towards, rather than something we can do just from listening tonight. But that's where we're headed towards, where you're actually regulated on the inside, not just trying to act like you're regulated when you're not. And as well, for our children, they're not at risk of being people pleasers or letting go of who they really are. So they have a real sense that people can show up in their relationships and be their full selves without it being a problem, right? We don't have to change ourselves or anyone else in order to have a healthy relationship if we take this approach to any time we have any kind of difficulty or conflict or problems to manage. If we take this kind of considerate and assertive approach, everybody is able to be themselves. We don't need to people please. We don't need to change who we are as people. Now, if you're feeling confident to do what we talked about tonight, remember to take a progressive improvement approach. So you don't need to like immediately be able to remember everything tomorrow, but we do want to expect improvement within a week, right? And so that doesn't mean a week of doing it perfectly, but a week of trying to do this process, we should see some improvement within a week. And then you want to consistently see improvement week in, week out, whenever you're working on it. So like, when we have children, we're not always able to consistently work on the things that are priorities for us. But when you do have the time and energy to be working on this, you want to be able to see improvement within a week. You're not seeing improvement, that's not a case of like, just keep going, it'll get better eventually. That means we need to tweak something. Now, once you have it sorted, watch the signs that you're falling back into old habits. We're changing like how you approach challenges with your child. And so it's very easy for that to, for that pattern to fall back into the old ways, right? The strength of your neurology around people pleasing or acquiescing or feeling like I'm only a good parent if I do what's important to my child, like all these, whatever the thing is that has conditioned you so far, for some things that are like since you were little, you've got decades of conditioning. For other things that maybe just since you've become a parent, you've got months or years of conditioning. So it takes some time to build the strength and the neural connections for this new approach to really take hold, to be consistent. You just want to check in from time to time. If you're falling back into old habits, come back and do like from the beginning. Okay, so where are we getting off track? Now, if you'd like some help, from here I'm going to be talking about some support that I could offer. So if that's not something that is the right next step for you, there's no more content available. Like I'm just going to be talking through the support I can offer. But if that's all you needed from tonight, feel free to jump off whenever you're ready. But if you'd like to hear about the support, you can stay on. I won't be very long. I know I'm running up to 9 o'clock. I won't be very long. So if we look at the overall approach here, these are the pillars that underpin everything that I do, whether it's listening or tantrums or helping kids to handle their feelings without lashing out, or helping siblings communicate, or helping children deal with the other parent who's not gentle parenting engaged, right? Everything comes back to these pillars. The first one is emotional awareness. So holding space for feelings, using feelings to identify needs, clearly articulating feelings and needs, and being curious about other people's feelings and needs. That's under that emotional awareness pillar. And we've got, like from this perspective, this is really about that emotional, like the skills to be emotionally aware within themselves and to be emotionally aware with other people, right? The next piece is the communication skills. So focusing on solutions that meet everybody's needs. So that's a skill in and of itself, like being skilled at going, okay, we've got this, this, and this that we need to take account of. Like what's a way to find to get that need met? It really is a skill to figure that out. Healthy boundaries when there's no workable solution, so important for little kids, bigger kids, and adults, right? But it's not really common in our culture that recognizing what healthy boundaries look like, feeling comfortable with healthy boundaries, and respecting other people's boundaries. One or more of those things are challenges for most people in our culture. And then healthy repair after conflict. Again, repair is like not something that we're skilled at in our culture. And so this is like, what does that look like in practice with our kids is really, really important. And then the last piece is making it the default response. So like it's building those habits through like developing the neural connections. We also want to heal, disconnect, or parent around our baggage. So in terms of our own baggage, we want to be looking at either unpacking it or what I call parent around it. So like recognizing that I have this baggage, how do I do what I want to do as a parent, even though I have this baggage? We can parent around anything. We just need to be clear on what we're working with. And then lastly, there's recognizing and releasing unhealthy cultural messaging. So that would be the things that are, things like gender roles and people pleasing and all of these things. are really important. Now, I did see a message, a question, but for some reason I clicked the button and it's gone. And so I'm just, oh no, I found it. It's gone. I've come back. Um, Okay, that's where it was a private message. That's why. And thank you for sending that through as private. So I'm going to read it out, but not with any identifying details. So with Christmas coming up, when we are surrounded by family and friends, it can be a stressful time. Do you have any suggestions of this approach and opinionated relatives? Yes, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is that a lot of gentle parenting wants us to assume that adults should not have any baggage, right? And so a lot of gentle parenting appears as though any adults that have difficulty, so I'll use a tantrum. Oh, sorry, no, let's use I'm going to use a tantrum example because it's easier. So if your child is tantruming and an adult is like saying, you should not be allowed to have feelings like that. Like it's inappropriate to carry on or whatever, like kind of old school position that they have. We focus on the fact that that does not allow space for the child's emotional experience, right? Rightly, we want to be making sure that the child is able to have a developmentally appropriate response to being overwhelmed. But the other piece to this is that somebody who says that a tantruming child should not be allowed to carry on has enormous baggage around feelings, right? It is excruciating for them to be around somebody who has feelings that they deem like that they feel are unsafe, right? So for some adults like this, anger is allowed, but being sad isn't, right? Or for some adults, it's like, if I agree that you would be upset by what's happened to you, then it's allowed for you to have feelings. But if I don't agree, then that being not allowed, it is excruciating for their nervous systems to be around somebody with unchecked feelings. That is a result of childhood emotional trauma, right? Now, and when I say trauma, I'm not talking about necessarily big things, but just the way our culture invalidates feelings consistently, right? That is a trauma that is unprocessed in a lot of people. Now, if we think about like in this case, it's almost like we want the adult to be the one to listen, right? It's like children should be allowed to have a genuine emotional response when they're overwhelmed. Well, how can we make this work for everybody? So if we assume that it is excruciating for that person to be around someone with in emotional overwhelm, can I take my child to another room or for a walk or to the car so that they can have their feelings, and that adult who has enormous baggage around feelings is also comfortable? And we can totally agree that it should be the adult who is the one who removes themselves rather than a child who's having a developmentally appropriate response to an overwhelm. But that still goes back to that would require that adult to have the self-awareness that they're carrying emotional baggage. And a lot of adults just acknowledging that would be like earth-shattering for them. It would be extremely confronting for them to recognize that they have baggage that they're carrying, right? And so then when we think about, if we bring this back to a listening example, I apologize, I'm taking a long time for this explanation, but it's something I'm really passionate about. If we take it to a listening example, often it'll be things like that they want children to just suck it up and do whatever they're told, right? Then what we want to look for is it workable for you to allow that adult to be in their feelings about how your child isn't immediately listening and just focus on finding a solution with your child? It may be comfortable for you to do that. It may not be comfortable for you to do that. If they are expecting your child to listen in a way that isn't working for your child, then you can use the language that I've talked about tonight as, absolutely, totally understand that it's important to you that everybody sits at the table. We're just trying to figure out a way that works for everybody, right? It's not impossible, particularly with people who carry a lot of baggage, but it is harder for someone to argue that we shouldn't find a way that works for everybody. Right now, some people will definitely argue that children need to understand, they just need to sit at the table. Yes, Jodie is learning about sitting at the table when it comes to dinner, but right at the moment, I think she really needs to move her body, right? And so what we might do is blah, blah, blah. And so you're looking for a solution that works for everybody. And I think this is one of the things is like in a gentle parenting spaces, that there's often an expectation that other people will get with the program in a way that's kind of impractical. Because can you imagine if you're a person who says that a child should not have their feelings, that it would be earth-shattering for that person to recognize that actually they've spent decades having their feelings invalidated and then invalidating their own feelings when all along their feelings were valid. That would be an earth-shattering experience, right? Whereas for most of us who are interested in gentle parenting, we have experienced the pain of our needs not being important or experienced the pain of our feelings being invalidated. And so we're very aware and motivated to make sure our children don't go through the same thing. Whereas for somebody who pushes their own feelings down to the point that they don't think anybody should have feelings, and again, maybe some feelings are allowed or allowed in certain circumstances, like for them to realize that actually for decades, other people have treated them as though their feelings are invalid when actually they were really valid, that would be an enormous change. So I hope that was I'm glad it helped. So it was a really long explanation. I apologize. I'm just get really passionate about all this stuff. Beautiful. So if anyone would like to do this together, I recommend starting with a 4-week package. So a session a week, roughly over 4 weeks, where what we can do together is I am really skilled at recognizing the needs that are at play in your most common tricky spots. So because I've been doing this with other families for 9 years, I'm really good at, based on your explanation of what's happening, I either can figure out what the need is underneath the behavior, or I can give you something to try that will help us differentiate between the needs. And that's something that I can do really, really well. The next thing is it can be helpful because I am not in the situation. It's easier for me to see solutions that might work for you, but you're just not seeing, right? Because you're in the thick of it, you're in the rut, you're in the, like, we always get stuck with this. It can be very hard to see the solution. And again, because I've been doing this for so many years, I've had to work with a lot of families with a lot of different, whether it's different approaches from the parents or different practical situations or whatever it is. I've got a lot of experience in finding the solutions that might work that you might not be able to see quickly yourself. I can also help you to get confident at making decisions when there's no solution, so that getting your child to listen just doesn't take so much time all the time, and that you can stay regulated, right? That piece about being comfortable, that when there's no easy option or no obvious solution, I'm just going to make the best available decision and I'm going to feel truly comfortable with that. I can also help you to build your skills to hold space for their feelings so that they can accept a no, like when there just isn't a way to solve it. The easier it is for you to hold space for those feelings, the quicker those feelings will pass, the more you have practice at holding space for those feelings, and your child still feels validated and heard, even when we can't find a solution. Now, for most parents, once we get through those pieces, your regulation is fine, because your regulation wasn't about your regulation wasn't just finding this a stressful thing. The issue for your regulation for most parents is actually because it's not working, right? So the more confident you get with this is working, and when it doesn't work, I know what to do. For most parents, your regulation will be fine. But for some parents, their regulation is still an issue. And so this can be the case for a variety of reasons. But in any case, I can help you find strategies to manage your emotions so that you can keep your cool even when things go wrong. And so to do this over 4 weeks, so there's be 4 sessions, about a week apart is ideal if we can. And that is $197. And you can book that in at jodithornton.com/4, FOUR for the number. And I have a question come through is there more to consider for neurodivergent children? So not really, because like ultimately, like it is different it looks different when we do the same process with neurodivergent children, but ultimately we're doing the same things, right? We're looking for what works for your child. And so you may find that a neurodivergent child, for some neurodivergent kids, autonomy is even more important, or clarity is really much more important. It's like power struggles are much easier to get into with neurodivergent kids in some cases. And so ultimately, when we're looking for how do we get this to work for everybody involved, it's the same process. Like we're looking for what is the need that your child has that means they're not listening, and what are your needs, and how do we communicate that with each other, and then how do we find a solution. So your solutions might look different. Also, your process of how you talk to your child about solutions might look different, but it's the same process, right? Like, so for example, a neurodivergent child that's not listening because they are in sensory overwhelm, we wouldn't want to use my approach of using 11 to billion words, right? For a neurodivergent child who's not listening because they're in sensory overwhelm, we want to get really practiced at using very short sentences to get our points across. And when you practice it, right, you'll get really good at this in order to help. You might also find that let's keep with the sensory overwhelm issue. So for a neurodivergent child who's in sensory overwhelm, you might agree with your child at a separate time to when the overwhelm happens. What am I going to do that helps you when you're in sensory overwhelm? Right now, the younger your child is, the more that will be you experimenting and seeing what does and doesn't work. The older your child gets, the more you want to involve them in the problem solving process of like, what might work for you? Would you like me to try this? Would you like me to try that? Also with neurodivergent children, let's say it's ADHD neurodivergence, we would look, often the solutions we're looking at are things that help them to stay on track, or things that help them to develop their executive functioning, and or ways that work even though they don't have the executive functioning skills, right? And so you can see how there's a difference between my executive functioning is lower because of my neurodivergence is different to I have not yet developed the full capacity of my executive functioning, which may or may not be equivalent to a child at the same developmental stage. But we want to look at developing that executive functioning as much as we can. And then what are our strategies that get to the outcome while accepting that their executive functioning works differently. And I would also say this hasn't been asked as a question, but I want to make the point that also works if the parent is neurodivergent. So whether it's you as a parent who's interested in this process, who is neurodivergent, or if your partner is neurodivergent, that is an important factor. Like, again, it's the same process of getting to the need and finding a solution, but it might look different if you are a neurodivergent person or your partner, or I keep saying partner, but it also might be your ex if you're not currently partnered, but your child's other parent. We would want to be doing this same process of figuring out what works for everybody. And this same process is how we deal with sibling disagreements. It's how we deal with conflicts between your child's other parent and your child. Is like you're leading the process of everybody learning this approach to, like, fundamentally, how do we cooperate with each other? You're leading everybody, building the skills to be able to do this independently. So again, I hope that helped. I'm always answering longer than I think I should probably be able to do, but anyway. Great. So I haven't got any other questions. I've still got time if there are any other questions. But particularly if you have questions about working together or anything that we've talked about today, you're more than welcome to send them through on email. And I've got time to stay around now for more questions if anyone has. Oh, and somebody has said, I could listen all day. Thank you so much, because I was just thinking the other day about how all these teachers that told me that I talk too much, and now I make my living from talking too much. Funny. But yes, so if you have any questions at all, please feel free to send them through on email. And if you'd like to go ahead and book in that package, I would really love to support you through this process, because I think, as I say, strong-willed kids, we get the quickest results with strong-willed kids because of their strengths. Like, they really are the easiest to work with, to get to listen for the right reasons, right? Not because they're acquiescing, but because they get really good at problem solving. And that shifts their dynamics with everybody else, right? Once they know what it looks like to solve problems in a way that's assertive and considerate, they can take that to their sibling relationships, their relationship with their other parent, their relationship with friends at school or daycare, their relationship with educators, right? They can take this, and obviously when they're little, not necessarily easy to be the only person focused on this kind of teamwork. But the more practice they get in their relationship with you, the more they can take it to all their other relationships. And as they get older, they really will be able to do it independently. So I will wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for being here, and the recording will come out a little later tonight. Thanks again.